So first of all, I'd like to say thank you to the Parari Group folks, Christy particularly, but everybody. I really enjoy making beer. I spent about 20 years as a high school teacher, so hopefully I won't put you guys to sleep too much. I enjoy teaching stuff. But one thing I'm really not good at is making things look appealing. So, like I should certainly be dressed better and all this stuff. But so you guys are really helping us out with that. Christy's doing our beer labels, and I'm starting to do some t-shirt branding, and hopefully we'll move her into some other things as well. So thanks for having me here, and thanks for making us look great. And it's my job to make the beer better. So wanted to come and talk a little bit this morning about building a community, because it's something that our brewery is really passionate about. And I figured the jobs that a lot of you guys that I've had a minute to talk to are also pretty passionate about. And my little twist on it is doing it through beer, which makes it easy. Unfortunately, I couldn't bring free beer to you guys. That would have made this a whole lot more exciting. So, like I said, you're welcome to keep the stickers if you like. That was the only thing I could think of to bring that was both useful and easy to port around. So, in terms of building a community, sort of thought about three things. You got to figure out, you have to know who you are, right, before you can engage meaningfully in a community. Then you have to figure out who your community is, and then you got to plan your game accordingly. And I figured that's sort of how we'd go through it. Little background on me before I get started, so I'm not just up here shrieking randomly. Like I said, I was a high school history teacher, but I've been running Pleasure House for just short of 3 years now. We had our second anniversary being open, but there was a lot of planning and build out and stuff. I also spent probably 150 or 160 hours listening to a podcast from the Brewing Network, which gave me a whole lot of the background, not only on making beer and the legal stuff, but also on how to engage people in the brewing community and also in the drinking community. And of course, spent a good amount of time networking with other brewers in the area to talk about how they do their things and how we can exchange ideas to make things better. So with that in mind, probably should start with the first part, which is knowing yourself. And it doesn't really matter whether you're a brewery or whether you're a museum person or somebody else, whatever your job is. Most of us have to deal with humans, and to do that, you have to figure out where you stand so you know how to relate to them, right? That's one of the other reasons I brought the sticker there. The name of our brewery is Pleasure House Brewing, and that was a big key in figuring out who we were, right? If you guys are from the area, that could lead you into some tricky areas because, Pleasure House Road in Virginia Beach, which is where I started brewing when I was a home brewer, and is just down the street from where the brewery is. It's called Pleasure House for reasons that don't have anything to do with beer and have to do more with the Navy and paying for company. I don't know. So, right, we wanted to avoid that altogether, but I love the name. And so I did a little bit of research, being a history guy. And what I found is that in the 1600s, there was supposedly in some area around the North End, what is it, we call it, Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel? No. Between there and the Bay Bridge Tunnel, somewhere, we're not sure, there was actually a colonial tavern. And I know that from teaching history myself, that was one of the few places where people could congregate. They lived pretty well spread out, often didn't see their neighbors for days or months on end. And so the tavern was one place where you would socialize, make your connections, get to actually hang out with other people. We try to focus on that side of the Pleasure House more than the more current Navy side. So that was an idea that appealed strongly to me. And so obviously, if you're going to run a brewery, you have to make beer. You have to make beer that people like. But there's so many breweries popping up right now, we figured that one of the key things was to make sure that we had deep roots in our community. And so we're looking to create not just a place to drink beer, but also a place where people make connections. We have lots of families that come into the brewery, believe it or not, especially on Sunday at noon we open. We have a lot of parents with newborns who come in. It's a chance for them to get out of the house and they can actually feel like still functioning adults rather than, I just have young kids, so I'm a little bit new to the experience, right? But you spend a lot of time with the kids and you're like, oh my gosh, adult conversation, who knew what that was like? So we focused on that part of the pleasure part. And the other thing that we wanted to do in terms of identity was to fit in with our community in terms of philosophy, I guess. So our part of Virginia Beach is a little bit different. We're up on the bay side on Shore Drive. So it's still somewhat of a locals area, not so much a tourist area. And even though there's pockets of areas with a lot of money, nobody looks like it, right? So but my wife grew up around there. She always used to tell me stories when we first started dating, that you'll see some guy, like riding this busted old bike down the road, and he's got like cut off jeans and hasn't cut his hair in 3 weeks, in 3 months or something. And that guy's like a real estate developer, right? Because it's just like a beach community. So that we tried to, I can't say tried because it's just sort of a natural thing. We felt like we really fit in with that area because our whole idea was to be extremely comfortable, comforting, welcoming, but also to be underneath that very savage about the quality of what we produce. And I think that has generally fit pretty well. And that sort of leads me to the second part, right? So once you figure out what your identity is, for us, a meeting place as well as beer, but also being really focused on good beer, you have to be able to connect to your community, right? You have to know who they are. And so again, I went back to people, right? If you're gonna dig roots or spread roots into a community, you gotta have people that are capable of doing that. I should probably have my wife here doing this. She was a public speaking teacher at TCC. Should be a lot more entertaining. Or Tim or Kevin, my two other business partners, because both of them have been bartenders and business folks for a long time. I spend most of my day in the dark back part of the brewery talking to big steel tanks and moving beer from place to place, which is something I love, but maybe not the greatest for connecting other people, I don't know. But really, we set out to find people who would really, who really embodied what we were looking for, which is that sense of comforting, of welcoming, and the sense of dedication to quality. Right. So my wife is one of our partners, but she has a real job. She's still teaching. Tim is the guy who runs what we call the front of house, right? So he's the face that most people see every day. He's the guy that serves the beer and whatnot. I would not have opened the brewery without him. Told him that from the get-go. My wife and I had agreed on that. We knew him because he was teaching at the Lynn Haven, or teaching, in some ways I guess. He was serving beer at the Lynn Haven pub, which is the little dive bar down the road from us. In a lot of ways, it's like what we do now. I say it's a little dive bar, and when you walk in the door in the pub, everybody in there just kind of turns and glares at you. Like we've been going there for, 8 or 10 years, and we know all the people, but you come in the door and they just go. And then they just come back to conversation, right? 3 minutes later, you're like having the greatest time of your life talking with these people. Doesn't matter whether you know them or not, but there's that first With all that said, and this goes back to the sort of the dedication to quality, that little dive bar where things are kind of sketchy has been rated #1 for small craft beer bars in Hampton Roads at least twice in the last 5 years. It's come in second or third a number of other times. And Tim is really the guy that got him on that move towards higher quality beer. So I knew that this is a guy he was deeply in touch with what we were trying to do. But what really got it was that he's almost unflappable, right? You put him in any situation, beer could be like shooting out of the taps behind him and whatever. He would make sure the people in front of him are dry and happy first, and then turn around and take care of that. And if you're going to be focused on building a community, you got to be focused on people, and he was the guy. Our other partner, Kevin, we call him the Wiz, because for whatever reason, when he was a kid, he had a dream about wizards chasing him. So he hates wizards like Gandalf, right out, right? So I don't know why we call him Wiz. Should be like no Wiz, I don't know. But anyway, he also looks like Chuck Norris, which is fun. Yeah, it's great. Got him because he worked in sales for quite a while, but had also been a local in Virginia Beach for about 15 years, right on Shore Drive. So those two things, being in sales, I think, and to be successful, you have to have certain abilities to interact with folks. And of course, being local and Shore Drive is a plus. He also had a hidden third talent, which I didn't know about at first. He's a enthusiastic Ohio State fan, and I don't know why, but there's a huge community of Ohio State folks around our neighborhood, right? So now we're sort of the Ohio State brewery, which is a cool thing I didn't even expect. And finally, although she doesn't work with us anymore, I had an assistant brewer for a while named Bree, who had just graduated from Virginia Wesleyan down the street. She had done some internships, was really excited about being a brewer. So I told her I would, hire her and give her her first real job in the brewing industry, if you want to call working for me a real job. But, we figured that would be a good tie to Wesleyan, to sort of the younger crowd. She was great, worked with us for almost 2 full years, and then she's moved to Pennsylvania with her fiance and is still working in the brewing world. But that was a nice tie-in as well. Those of you guys who are not huge craft beer folks, tends to be a little bit more expensive, and that means demographically we're talking about mostly 25 to 55 is the age range. So having just graduated, her group was a little on the lower end, but gave us a lot of connections. And we've had a lot of job applications and a lot of folks coming in that were friends of hers. So that was pretty cool. So know who you are, right? Get people that are able to interact with the community, which is what we were lucky enough to do. And then I guess for the sort of the final part is to develop programs that encourage that sense of community. For us, one of the biggest ones is doing charity work. It's a big thing for craft breweries in general, but we do a lot of contributions to charities. But one thing we do every week is that on Sunday night we have something called Crock for a Cause. So our license doesn't allow us to make food, but you're allowed. It's a strange thing. You can bring food in, you could have it delivered, you could go to the store, you could make it at home and have it there. So we were thinking about how to make that work for our community. And Tim came up with an idea, this Crock for a Cause idea. So every Sunday at 6, we have people in the community come in, and because everybody likes not everybody. There's always a lot of people who like to make food, right? And to share it. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a crock pot thing, that just is convenient, right? So they bring in their best crock pot dish or their best one dish meal or whatever, and basically contribute it to share with anybody who's there that wants it. So if you're there and you want to eat, you pay at least $5. That money goes straight to a local no-kill, all-breed dog rescue shelter called Canine New Life. And then at the end of this all, what we do is have everybody that bought dinner gets a ticket, and they get to vote for who they thought did the best meal that day, and then we give that person a $40 gift card to the brewery to sort of thank them and for the expense and whatnot. That has grown into a thing. And like people come over. There's a place in New Jersey now that's doing Crocks for a Cause. Big Ugly down in Chesapeake actually called and said, "Hey, we heard about this. Do you mind if we do something like that?" Sure, no problem. So that's one of our big things, and I think again, it's like people sharing their home cooked stuff, other people voting and appreciating it. We actually get chefs that come in now to try and contribute. So it's kind of a cool thing. The food is really well. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Yeah, it's pretty funny. I like it because it's like the little guy sticks it to him sometimes. The chef comes in and like, "Oh, I got this." Exactly, I'm done. So, trying to think of what else I got all excited there and forgot where I was going. Oh, community events, right. So, we also host a local church group on Monday nights. They do like Pints for Jesus or something. I'm not sure what the name of it is, but it's something something like that. Obviously, it's a relatively more progressive, modern church, right? Yeah, exactly. On Wednesdays, we do the local trivia, that sort of thing. But really, it all goes back to trying to make sure that we're serving our community best we can. This is sort of a sad note. There's a brewery down the road called Wasserhund, and they're one of the owners and the head brewer had a stroke. He's 28. Good news is he's back in the brewery and he's able to brew again, but he was out of commission for almost a month, and I guess he's still having some trouble talking. So we are doing, and a lot of the other breweries in the areas have done or are doing fundraisers to sort of help with the medical bills. I know that a couple folks actually from other breweries went over and brewed beer for him on his system while he was in the hospital so they could stay in business. So it's a cool group to be a part of. I think it's pretty much a good community no matter how you cut it. And I guess, I don't know how much time I've used, but to sort of head towards wrapping up here, I think one of our primary issues, and of course it's a business, so can only take this so far, but sort of one of our primary ideas is that people have to come before profits. You know, we waste more beer than I would like to, you know, in a variety of ways. But the reality is, by that I mean, so when you come into the brewery for the first time, like maybe you're not big into craft beer, or, you know, we've got 11 different beers and they change all the time. So maybe you're not sure what's on there that you might like this week. So, you know, we let people sample as much as they want to beforehand. I do know there are breweries who won't, you have to pay for every sample, right? But while that makes a lot of sense to me as a business move, you know, in terms of pure profit, on the other hand, it can be very off-putting to folks who are not, you know, really into the craft beer scene, because why are you going to pay $1.50 for something that you want to sample because you don't know if you like it in the first place, which is why you're sampling it. And, you know, if people, a lot of times people, you know, they come in all gung-ho and like, no, I'll just take a pint of it, and they take 2 sips and they get that look, and you're like, you know, we could charge them for that beer because, you know, they asked for it, but at the end of the day, the whole point is to make sure that they enjoy their experience so that they can sit down and talk to the, you know, the great people that are there and hang out. You know, so we'll swap that out or whatever. So again, obviously there's limits to that, because if you don't make any profits, then your business goes away in a heartbeat and there's no community to be part of. But you know, we try to err on the side of generosity and of people, because ultimately that's what communities are all about. It's a great question. Talk about you know, oversaturation. It's a term brewers talk about all the time, but you've really hit a good question. And originally that's what I was going to talk about today, but I thought, you know, the community part might be a little more applicable. We recently had a sort of brewing, like professionals and media and a handful of well-known people that go to all the breweries a lot, got together and did a group called the Bright Tank, and we talked about that a lot. And this is my opinion, of course, and other people have other ones, but I think the shortest answer I can give you is that the days of something like O'Connor, you know, where he started 5 years ago and now is distributed from DC all the way down to the Outer Banks, unless you have an unbelievable amount of money and a lot of PR leverage, those days are over for the next 10 to 20 years. To me, the good point is, and that goes back to the community aspect, I think there's an enormous amount of room for breweries like ours. I think that, you know, like if you look at a lot of places in Europe, that there are just neighborhood breweries, right? And you can't get their beer anywhere else, and that's fine. They're not trying to, you know, be captains of industry that take over the world and make millions of dollars. They just love making beer. They love the community they're part of, and that's what they do. So I think the growth will continue for a while. As always, when growth patterns change, I expect that there will be a significant number of people who still try to take over the world, only to find that there aren't any tap handles left for them to take. And, you know, when you go to the grocery store or any beer store now, there's just like a bewildering array of beer. It's real hard to make yours stick out now and give people you know, a reason to buy an unknown beer over the ones they love. So, yeah. So I got into brewing by accident. I made a Mr. Beer kit beer like in the 1990s. It was atrocious, you know. But I think those are a little too oversimplified. But my now brother-in-law gave me a beer brewing kit in 2009, and that was literally the first time I brewed beer. And the first beer was meh. Second beer was okay. The third beer I made was a German wheat beer, and I decided to get sassy and put kiwi in it, right? Because it was late spring. It was I drank it. I was like, holy cow, this is fantastic. And that's basically when the addiction started. Not to drinking beer. I've been doing that for a while, but making beer. Partly, yeah, exactly. Partly, I semi-joke about this, that one of the reasons my wife was willing to invest in the brewery and, give up some time together and support building the brewery and all that stuff is because she wanted all that stuff out of the bathrooms and the kitchens and all that stuff. So I kind of slowly moved from the kitchen to the back porch to her father-in-law's, detached garage. She kept getting stepped far. So it was a natural next move, I guess. So, yeah, who knew? I guess there's a short-term answer and a long-term answer. The short-term answer is that when Bree, my assistant brewer, left to go to Pennsylvania, I was faced with a choice. I could either, because I run the business stuff as well. I don't do much front of the house. They don't let me behind the bar because I drop glasses and people ask for beer and I start talking to them and like 20 minutes later the other guy's like, that beer I wanted. When she left, I could either hire another assistant brewer so I could have time to do the business and brew beer, in which case I would have to pay that person, a salary every year, or I could spend 1 year of what I was paying her as a salary and produce twice as much beer at one time, in which case I could brew half as often and that would still give me time to run the business. So that's what the choice was. So that's the short-term version. The longer-term version is that if we continue to be successful, so what she's talking about is actually it's called a brew house. So it's where you like boil the wort and stuff. So it's the prep work that takes about 8 hours. Once that's done, you transfer that sugar water basically into a big steel tank with yeast, and the yeast turns it into beer for you. So the longer term answer is that I could double the size of my fermenters where the yeast turns the wort into beer, and produce twice as much beer. There are a couple things in theory, but like everything in life, there's a trade-off, right? So the food aspect, that's pretty much a guarantee. If you have food on site, people stay longer, which means they generally drink more. The downside to that is that if you ever worked in a restaurant or even been to a restaurant, there's like hundreds of people involved, so then your overhead just skyrockets, right? If you make good food or good beer, or hopefully both, you can make a killing at it, but the investment's huge. One of our things, and one of the reasons maybe why we have that people before profits thing, is that we didn't take any money from anybody, so we don't owe any money to anybody. But that's also why I had to make a lot of my own equipment. That we're gradually replacing that over time. A lot of brewers will also talk about changes in the distribution laws, right? So if you guys know this, I'll try to keep it short. If you have questions, we can go there. But we have what's called a 3-tier system, right? Which means that you have brewers, you have distributors, and you have retailers. In theory, nobody except apparently Anheuser-Busch is allowed to be more than one of those, right? So since I run a brewery, I can't be more than 10% owner in a distributor or in a retail spot. There are some states where they can, like North Carolina, for instance, if you make less than 25,000 barrels a year, which is a ridiculous amount of beer, like this year, we'll double our production and be about 1,000 barrels, right? Thank you. Then you can self-distribute, which means instead I can skip all that and I can walk across the street to CP Shuckers and say, hey, I got these kegs of beer in my truck, you want some? And they pay me directly, which is great because right now I sell a keg of beer to my distributor for $40. He sells it to the restaurant for $60, and the restaurant sells it, at $6 a pint for $250. So the downside of that, though, is that then I would have to have a refrigerator truck and pay somebody to do deliveries. You have to have a separate bonded warehouse, and so there's always those trade-offs. We ran our first print ad last month for $200 in Virginia Craft Beer Magazine and Beer. I guess they're tied together. And I guess we were on a local, I know we were, I haven't seen it yet, but we filmed like part of a local Cox TV advertising show. It's called Untapped Virginia, and basically they're going around the state to visit different breweries. I think we were the second one. O'Connor was the first. So they did a local bottle shop, us, and then a restaurant called Simple Eats across the street in sort of one episode. We didn't end up having to pay for that because I guess the state of Virginia gave them a grant to do the show for a while because it promotes Virginia stuff. So we've done a very limited, mostly it's social media stuff. As I said, I'm not very good at making things look good, so I don't know how effective my social media efforts are. Someday when we have a little more money, then maybe I can hire somebody who's really good at it. And yeah, oh yeah. Well, she's awesome, by the way. If you need something branded, thank you. Yeah, but generally, there are breweries that spend a lot more on advertising. And by that, I generally mean there are distributors who spend a lot on advertising on behalf of their breweries. We went with a distributor that's a little bit less well known in the area. We're one of only 2 Virginia craft brewery, well, from Richmond this way at least, that works with specialty distributing. Breweries don't do a lot of advertising until they hit like, multi-state sort of thing.
So that you've done so far, you really can't measure.
Right.
What effect it's
Right.
having so far.
And that's really, we've done a few things here and there. But as you point out, like there's no metric aside from running a specific deal, like, bring in this coupon from that print magazine or whatever, and then we could track it that way. But most places don't offer that, at least the ones that we've talked to, so. Yeah. If you have a brainstorm about how we can do that better, I'd love to hear it.